Thank you very much. And after, I think it's now 19 years since I first went to Nevada, I've learnt to say Nevada. So when you hear me say Nevada, 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 that's just so you know, that's how they pronounce it in state. And so it's something that I've made sure and insist on now whenever I'm over there and here too, that I must pronounce it Nevada. So our mission at ioneer is to produce the materials that are necessary for a sustainable and thriving planet. And we're delivering on that mission by bringing into production a truly world-class deposit, Rhyolite Ridge, located about halfway between Reno, Nevada and Las Vegas. Truly amazing deposit, one of only 2 lithium and boron deposits of size anywhere in the world. The second one being Rio Tinto's project in Serbia. They're closely related, the two of them, but they're different as well. There's nothing else like them anywhere else in the world. Please read the disclaimer before making any investment decisions. So on this talk, I'm going to focus on a few areas. The lithium and boron market, very briefly, a corporate overview of ioneer, a few words about the project itself, but really I want to talk about the next steps, what's coming up over the next couple of months and through to the end of the year. And I think I'm available for questions later, so we won't have time for that when I'm up on stage, but please come and visit us afterwards if you do have questions. So the lithium and boron market, I think everyone's got a view, and it's, I think, almost united in the positive outlook for lithium. We don't hear many people with a negative view. But just to put some numbers in context, the world produces plus or minus 500,000 tonnes of lithium chemicals a year. A few years ago when I started working on this project, it was actually only around about 300,000 tonnes. So it's grown quite quickly, but it's still a small tonnage. Most think that with the take-up of EVs, and that's what the demand is all about, we're going to be going from about 500,000 tonnes to about 3 million tonnes of lithium chemicals global demand by the end of this decade. And on the graph on the right shows that there's a problem with that, and the supply equation doesn't, they don't coincide, they don't meet. And so there's an increasing deficit, particularly from about 2025 onwards. And what that's going to mean is that by the end of this decade, there's going to be a shortfall of lithium chemical of around about 500,000. Some people put it as much as 1 million tonnes a year. So that's the total world production as of today as a shortfall in less than 8 years. Quite amazing, and that's what's going to drive a high lithium price for a long time into the future. In the US context, we will become the first lithium production in over 50 years, a new lithium production in the US. The US is insignificant in what it produces today. It's about somewhere around 5,000 or 6,000 tonnes of lithium. It's going to need hundreds of thousands of tonnes of material by the end of this decade. So in terms of domestic supply in the US, there is none today, but there has to be, and everyone, including the US government, bipartisan, agrees on that. It's the second largest car market in the world. It needs domestic lithium. Borate market. So this is a lithium and boron deposit. The boron is not a byproduct, it's a co-product. It's more than $100 million a year of revenue from the boron. So it really is a major contributor to the economics. Boron is used, people probably, and maybe until recently, have heard very little about the boron market. It's a duopoly, Rio Tinto, the Turkish government. But the thing about boron is it's incredibly stable. Some people will say boring boron, it's anything but boring. However, it does have a very stable supply demand. That's what's kept prices stable for more than 100 years. It's used in a myriad of applications, and some of them are listed there. Borosilicate glass is the big one though. US is the second largest consumer in the world behind China. What people don't know though about boron is actually it's a fundamental material for electrification as well, not only because of borosilicate glass in solar panels, but also because it's used in a myriad of applications in electric vehicles, from the TFT screens, the carpets, the electric motors, the neodymium iron boron magnets, the boron carbide that makes up the chassis as boron steel, very strong and very lightweight, companies like Ford and Volvo out of the blue are starting to talk about this material as an essential ingredient for electrification, which is a good thing for us. Corporate overview, I think the key things there are that we're a company with a market capitalisation around about 1.4 billion. We have $144 million in Aussie dollars in cash, so we're well funded. We're funded through to FID. And our share register is also impressive. We have Centaurus and Sibanye as our two largest shareholders, but we also have 25% rather, institutional holders, and I think it's about 30% plus or minus that are US shareholders, which is important when I come to talk about some of the things that are coming up in the future. So when you're building a project and a mine like Rhyolite Ridge, like ioneer, it doesn't really start out on the ground, of course. It starts with building the team, and I must admit I must be one of the most fortunate MDs of any ASX company, particularly resource company, with the board and the management team that I've got around me. Extremely fortunate. I'm not going to go through all the names, you can read them for yourselves, but if I look at it, at what we're trying to do, you know, and ask the question, do we have the team to be able to do it? Then we've got a team that has engineered, designed, built and operated large lithium, boron and chemical projects around the world. We've also got a team of sales and marketing people that have sold lithium and boron around the world that have mainly come out of Rio Tinto. We've got a team that's financed large projects before, and that puts us in a fantastic position to deliver on this project. And we're surrounded by world-class partners. That's been a key when we've been selecting the types of partners that are listed there, and cornered by, of course, our strategic partner in Sibanye-Stillwater, who will become our 50% joint venture partner when we make a final investment decision. So the Rhyolite Ridge project itself, located about halfway between Reno and Las Vegas. It's very close to sealed roads. It's on public lands. There's no competing land use. It's an area where I myself personally have worked mainly in gold exploration over many years, so I know the area really well. The economics that are shown there on that slide come from our 2020 definitive feasibility study, so it's 2 years ago since we finished that work. But what that shows is we can produce about 22,000 tonnes of lithium a year, lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide if we choose to produce that, 174,000 tonnes of boric acid. So it's about 1 tonne of lithium, around between 7 and 9 tonnes of boric acid. So by volume, there's a lot of boric acid. By revenue, it's about, you know, around 30%. That boric acid at more than $100 million a year means that about 70% of our costs are covered by boric acid. So if you like to think of it as a byproduct or a credit, then that will make us the lowest cost lithium producer in the world at around about $2,500 a tonne of lithium carbonate after that boric acid credit is applied. It's an $800 million project, after-tax NPV of 1.2 billion, 5-year payback. So we talk about this as being the most advanced lithium project in the United States, which it is, and these are the key things that justify that statement. We're on track to be construction ready by the end of this year. The engineering will be done. That will allow us to commence construction. We've done a full simulation pilot plant. We probably spent around about 110 or a little bit more $1 million on this project over the last 5 or 6 years. Our environmental baseline studies have all been completed and accepted by the federal government. We have binding offtakes for boron and about 1/3 of our lithium production, and we have this Sibanye-Stillwater joint venture that's been announced that I mentioned, $490 million investment upon FID. Strong commitment to sustainability. And this relates directly to the deposit that we're dealing with that allows us to do this. So we are not connected to the grid. All of our power comes from our sulfuric acid plant. So we have no electricity, no gas pipeline. The power all comes from there, the heating comes from there, and in fact we may end up having some surplus energy that we can later sell into the grid. There is no grid lines near us at the moment, but we think they'll be built in the future. The process though also allows us to be a very low water user. So we're doing a leach like you would an oxide copper. We could have done it in a heap leach, but there are reasons why we do it in a vat, which means we control and contain all the water. Something like between 50 and 60% of all of our water gets recycled. So a low water user, no tailings because we can dry stack the material. So we don't have any tailings ponds, we don't have any evaporation ponds. So we have a very small footprint. We're using cutting edge with our partner Caterpillar equipment, energy efficient equipment, and we've got this really strong commitment to sustainability which applies across all those things that I've just mentioned. So next steps. Key work streams over the next few months are on this slide. So we've done about a third of our lithium under offtake. That's with EcoPro Innovation, one of the largest cathode makers in the world, a Korean-based group. But we've got 2 additional lithium offtake agreements that we expect to close this quarter. We've already announced that they will be into the US supply chain. We want this Nevada lithium to stay in the United States. And so that's been a key driver of who we're partnering with on offtake, and you'll hear more about that over the next, between now and the end of June. We're planning a listing on the NASDAQ. That's very advanced. We're also expecting that will happen over the next 2 months. We've done a lot of the preparatory work and we're just finishing off a few filings. That comes back to 2 things. Why are we doing it? Because we have already a shareholder base that is a significant shareholder base in the United States, but it's more than that. It's about, this is a fundamental project that's going to supply lithium into the United States electric vehicle industry as the whole energy space transforms, and it needs to be listed in the United States. That's the view of our board and my view also. On project funding, we mentioned $490 million from Sibanye. That leaves us with another, $400 to $500 million. We're looking at putting in place $1 billion of funding in total. And in our case, what we've done is applied to the US Department of Energy under their ATVM program for debt funding. We were the first, as far as I'm aware, the first lithium company to be invited formally into that process. That happened late last year after most of 2021 spent doing due diligence with them. But they've invited us into the sort of more formal part of that due diligence process. We're right in the middle of that now. So, we would be expecting an outcome of that later this year. We're also in conjunction though working with Sibanye and Goldman Sachs on alternatives. If we're not successful, we think we have an excellent chance of being successful, but if we're not, we have alternative plans for the financing, and obviously having a partner with a strong balance sheet like Sibanye makes a world of difference. On the detailed engineering, that work has been continuing. Where we finished the definitive feasibility study back in March, April of 2020, but we didn't stop there. We could have parked it and just sat and waited, but we didn't. Our board made a decision, we had the capital in place, that we would continue that engineering work with Fluor, with SNC-Lavalin, with Fluor and SNC-Lavalin to ensure that by the end of this calendar year, we are ready to take the machinery out on the site and start ground preparations. Obviously that's subject to permitting, and we've been working on the permitting as well. There are many smaller minor permits required with an operation like this, but there are 3 key ones. We already have 2 of those granted, and the third one, which is known as a plan of operation, which is issued by the Bureau of Land Management, part of the Department of the Interior. We are working closely with them, and we've made some revisions to our original plan. We're about to resubmit that into the BLM, and we're expecting that would then move into the final stage of permitting process. So that puts us in a strong position to be making that FID in the first half of next year and being in a position with the financing and the engineering in place to immediately commence construction. Thank you very much.